The rain poured down hard on the expensive cemetery in Manhattan, where rich and powerful people stood together in black clothes holding umbrellas over their heads. They came to say goodbye to Richard Morrison, who had built one of the biggest technology companies in America and made $60 billion before he died at age 63. The priest spoke in a low voice about Richard's achievements while everyone listened quietly with sad faces. Catherine Morrison stood at the front wearing a black dress and veil with her son Brandon on one side and daughter Sophie on the other side. The three of them looked straight ahead at the coffin that would soon go into the ground. Politicians and movie stars and other billionaires filled the rows behind them. Security guards in dark suits watched from different spots around the cemetery to make sure everything stayed peaceful and respectful. Nobody expected what happened next. A woman's voice suddenly cut through the sound of rain hitting umbrellas, and she shouted from somewhere near the back of the crowd. The security guards turned their heads quickly to see where the noise came from. A woman pushed through the people trying to get to the front, and her clothes were torn and dirty, and water dripped from her hair and face. She carried an old bag against her chest and moved with purpose even though two security guards grabbed her arms to stop her. The priest stopped talking, and everyone turned to look at the woman who clearly had no business being at such an important funeral. She was black and appeared to be homeless based on the layers of ragged clothing she wore and the desperate look in her eyes. One guard spoke firmly and told her she needed to leave right away, but she shook her head hard and kept pushing forward. She called out that her name was Gloria Hayes, and she had something important that Richard wanted her to deliver to his wife. The crowd made sounds of shock and confusion because nobody understood how a homeless woman could know anything about Richard Morrison. Catherine raised one gloved hand in the air, and the guard stopped pulling Gloria away. Catherine's voice came out quiet but strong when she said to let the woman speak. Gloria stumbled forward and fell down on her knees in the mud right in front of the coffin. Her hands shook badly as she opened her old leather bag and pulled out an envelope that looked yellow with age, but someone had kept it safe and dry inside plastic. She held it up toward Catherine and explained that Richard gave her this envelope 23 years ago and made her promise on everything holy that if he died, she would bring it to his funeral. Catherine walked down from the covered area into the rain, and her expensive shoes sank into the soft ground. She took the envelope from Gloria's wet hands and looked at the woman's face for a long moment. The envelope had a wax seal with Richard's personal symbol pressed into it, and Catherine knew his handwriting on the front that said to open it only at his funeral with other people watching. Catherine helped Gloria stand up from the mud and told the funeral director to bring chairs under the tent. The rich people watching could not believe what they saw when Catherine Morrison sat down and had the homeless woman sit right next to her like they were equals. Catherine's fingers worked carefully to break the wax seal, and she unfolded the paper inside. She began reading out loud so everyone could hear, even though her hands trembled a little. The letter started by addressing Catherine and Brandon and Sophie as his dearest family. Richard wrote that if they heard these words, it meant he had died, and now he could finally share a truth he kept secret for more than 20 years. He explained that the woman who brought the letter was Gloria Hayes, and 23 years earlier on one terrible night she had saved his life. People in the crowd gasped and whispered to each other because Richard Morrison seemed like someone who had everything and never needed saving. Catherine kept reading, and her voice got stronger even though tears started running down her cheeks. Richard wrote that he had been standing on the Brooklyn Bridge at 2 a.m, ready to jump off and end his life. His first company had failed completely, and he lost all his money and his investors' money, and everyone thought he was a failure. He could not see any reason to keep living. Then Gloria walked up to him even though she was homeless and had nothing. She saw the pain in his face and refused to leave him alone on that bridge. She talked to him for 4 hours, sharing her own stories about losing people she loved and surviving terrible things until the sun came up, and Richard found the strength to step back from the edge. Sophie started crying, and Brandon put his arm around his sister while they listened. Gloria sat with tears streaming down her worn face and her hands pressed together in her lap. Catherine read that Richard made 2 promises to Gloria that night. First, he would rebuild his life and make something meaningful to honor the gift she gave him. Second, he would find a way to repay her kindness. Gloria had refused money every single time Richard offered it over the years. She told him the streets were her choice and her path, and knowing that he survived was payment enough. Richard wrote that he never forgot what he owed her. Catherine turned the page and her eyes went wide when she read ahead silently for a moment. She looked at Gloria and then back at the letter before continuing to read out loud. Richard explained that he created something called the Hayes Foundation in Gloria's name, and it had been operating in secret for 20 years. Every homeless shelter in New York City, and every soup kitchen and every job training program for homeless people had received money from this foundation. Richard had invested over $2 billion to help people like Gloria, who society ignored but who had wisdom and dignity that most rich people would never understand. The crowd erupted into loud whispers, and people turned to their neighbors asking if they heard correctly about $2 billion going to help homeless people without anyone knowing. Gloria's mouth fell open and she whispered the words $2 billion like she could not believe such an amount of money existed in the world. Catherine found herself smiling even though tears kept falling, because this was exactly the kind of thing Richard would do without telling anyone. She continued reading from the letter while everyone listened in complete silence now. Richard wrote that the foundation was never enough to repay what Gloria did for him. He explained that Gloria told him on the bridge that every person has value, and every life contains the potential for greatness. She made him promise to really see people and not just look at their circumstances. Richard said that Gloria changed everything about how he built his companies and treated his employees and raised his children. She was the reason Morrison Technologies had the happiest workers in the entire industry, and the best mental health benefits, and the strongest commitment to hiring people who made mistakes in their past. Brandon leaned forward in his chair, and his face went pale because he always wondered why his father insisted on certain company policies that cost more money and did not make business sense. Now he finally understood where those ideas came from. Catherine read that the foundation would continue forever, but that was not the complete extent of Richard's gratitude. He wrote directly to Gloria and reminded her that she once said she stayed on the streets by choice because she found freedom there that she could not find in normal life. Richard respected that choice, but he also wanted to make sure that if Gloria ever changed her mind and wanted to step into a different kind of life, the door would be open for her. Catherine's hands shook more as she turned to the final page of the letter. Richard had written that he placed in trust for Gloria Hayes the sum of $100 million to be released when he died with no rules or restrictions about how she had to use it. Additionally, he had bought and paid for a brownstone house in Brooklyn Heights, on the very street where Gloria walked him home that morning after saving his life. The house was completely paid for and fully furnished, and Gloria could keep it or sell it or ignore it completely as she wanted. Gloria made a sound that was half crying and half laughing. She looked up at the gray sky and whispered that Richard was a beautiful fool for doing all this. The other mourners sat frozen in shock at what they just heard. Reporters who had been kept far away from the funeral were now frantically making phone calls to their newsrooms. The billionaires and celebrities talked quietly among themselves, and their faces showed shock and admiration, and some showed jealousy. Catherine folded the letter very carefully and turned to face Gloria directly. She told Gloria that Richard left one more thing and pulled a small box from inside the envelope. Catherine opened the box to show a simple silver key inside. She explained that this was the key to the brownstone house, and the address was carved into the metal. There was also a letter from Richard's lawyers who had been waiting for this exact moment for more than 10 years. Gloria took the key with shaking hands and stared at it like it might disappear if she looked away. She asked why Richard did not just give her all these things when he was alive, and why he waited until after his death. Catherine answered gently that Richard knew Gloria would refuse everything if he offered it while he lived. Her husband was many things, but he understood people very well. He knew the only way to make sure Gloria received what she deserved was to make it impossible for her to say no, by announcing his wishes in public at his funeral where the whole world could see and hear. Sophie stood up from her chair and moved to sit on Gloria's other side. She spoke softly and told Gloria that their father talked about her over the years. He never used Gloria's name, but he told his children about the woman who saved his life. Richard said she taught him that wealth without wisdom is worthless, and success without compassion is failure. He called her the most important teacher he ever had in his entire life. Gloria closed her eyes and let tears stream freely down her weathered cheeks. She said that Richard was just a kid really when she met him on that bridge. He was so full of pain and disappointment about failing. She explained that she just did what any decent person should do, which was stay with him and listen to him, and remind him that the sun would come up again no matter how dark the night felt. Brandon spoke for the first time since Gloria arrived, and his voice was thick with emotion. He told Gloria that she gave them their father back. She gave thousands of employees their jobs and their livelihoods. She gave millions of people better lives through all the foundation's work over 20 years. And she did all of it without ever asking for anything in return or even knowing what Richard had built in her name. The priest who had been standing awkwardly to the side cleared his throat and suggested quietly that perhaps they should continue with the funeral ceremony. Catherine nodded her head, but she kept holding Gloria's hand tightly. She told Gloria that she would stay for the rest of the funeral, and it was not a question or request. Gloria would sit with the family for the remainder of the service. The mourners watched as Gloria Hayes took her place between Catherine and Sophie Morrison, while the priest resumed speaking his final blessings over Richard's coffin. The ceremony continued with a different feeling in the air now, because everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. The priest's words about eternal rest and heavenly peace carried more weight after what they learned about Richard saving people through his foundation. When the workers lowered Richard's coffin into the ground, Gloria stood between Catherine and Sophie with her head bowed and her lips moving in silent prayer. After the final blessing, the crowd began to break apart slowly. Several people approached Gloria as she stood near the grave. Some offered genuine congratulations and respect with warm handshakes. Others looked at her with calculating eyes like they were trying to figure out how to benefit from knowing this newly wealthy woman. Catherine noticed these people and moved closer to Gloria protectively. A distinguished older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses walked toward them, carrying a leather briefcase. Catherine introduced him as Marcus Chen, who had been Richard's personal attorney for 30 years. Marcus smiled warmly at Gloria and told her he had been waiting 23 years to finally meet her in person. He explained that Richard spoke of her often over the decades. Marcus said he had all the legal documentation ready for Gloria to review whenever she felt prepared, but there was absolutely no rush to deal with any of it. Gloria laughed, but the sound came out strange, like she could not quite believe any of this was real. She told Marcus that she woke up that morning in a shelter on the Lower East Side, wondering where her next meal would come from. Now people were telling her she was a millionaire who owned a house. She said she did not think there was enough time in the entire world to process such a massive change. Marcus spoke gently and suggested they start with the basics then. He explained that the brownstone house was ready for her to move in immediately if she wanted. A caretaker service had been maintaining it and keeping it clean. The staff knew about the situation and were prepared to help Gloria with whatever she needed. Gloria's eyes went wide when Marcus said the word staff. She said no, that was way too much, and she just needed something simple. Then she stopped talking because she realized she had no idea what she actually needed anymore. Catherine squeezed Gloria's hand and offered to have Gloria come back to the Morrison family home first. She could get out of her wet clothes and have some food, and they could help her figure out what to do next. Catherine promised there was no pressure to make any big decisions today. Gloria looked down at her layers of torn and dirty clothes and suddenly felt very aware of how out of place she was among all these wealthy, polished people in their expensive outfits. Before she could say she should probably just go back to the shelter, Brandon spoke up firmly. He told Gloria that his father trusted her with his life, and that made her family in their eyes. Family did not worry about fancy rules or feeling uncomfortable. He asked her please to let them help her the same way she helped Richard all those years ago. Sophie nodded in agreement and linked her arm through Gloria's. She said they would take care of everything and Gloria did not need to worry about a single thing. The four of them walked through the cemetery toward the waiting car, while reporters shouted questions from behind the security barriers. Camera flashes went off as photographers captured images of the Morrison family escorting a homeless woman away from the funeral. By tomorrow morning, Gloria's face would be on the front page of every newspaper in the country. The Morrison family's car was a long black luxury sedan that Gloria had only seen in movies and magazines. As they drove through Manhattan toward the Upper East Side, Gloria pressed her face against the window watching the city pass by. She knew these streets better than anyone, having walked them for years, but seeing them from inside an expensive car felt completely different. Gloria pointed to a corner near Central Park and said quietly that she used to sleep right there. She explained there was a heating grate that stayed warm even in the worst winter weather. Then she pointed at a small deli and told them about the owner named Mr. Patel, who gave her day-old sandwiches every Thursday without fail. She called him a good man with a kind heart. Catherine listened carefully and realized she had lived in this city for 30 years, but never truly saw it the way someone like Gloria did. She offered to have the driver stop if Gloria wanted to say goodbye to people she knew and tell them about what happened. Gloria shook her head and said not yet because her friends on the street would never believe any of this anyway. She added that she did not believe it herself either. When they arrived at the Morrison residence, which was a historic townhouse worth $30 million, the household staff had already been told about the unusual situation. Instead of the judgment Gloria feared, she was greeted with warmth and respect. The head housekeeper was an older woman named Margaret who showed Gloria upstairs to a guest suite. Margaret explained that the bathroom was through the far door, and she had laid out some clean clothes that should fit reasonably well. The clothes belonged to Catherine's sister, who was about the same size as Gloria. Margaret told Gloria to take all the time she needed and she would have hot tea and food sent up shortly. Left alone, Gloria stood in the center of the beautiful room, afraid to touch anything because her hands were still dirty. The bed was larger than some of the spaces she had slept in over the past years. She walked slowly toward the bathroom like she was approaching something sacred. The shower was unlike anything Gloria had experienced in years. Hot water poured down endlessly and perfectly, washing away not just the dirt from her skin, but layers of struggle and survival that had built up over time. She stood under the spray for a long time, letting the heat soak into her bones. Gloria wept as the water ran over her face, mixing with her tears. She cried for Richard and for the brilliant, troubled young man she met on that bridge, who went on to build an empire. She cried for all the years she spent on the streets by choice after her daughter died, because she could not bear to live in a world without her child. She cried for the second chance Richard was giving her, even from beyond the grave. When Gloria finally turned off the water and stepped out, she wrapped herself in the softest bathrobe she had ever touched. She caught sight of herself in the large mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. Her face was clean and her eyes were red from crying, but she looked almost peaceful. The clothes Margaret left on the bed were simple but elegant. A pair of dark pants and a soft sweater and undergarments still in their packaging. There were even socks and a pair of comfortable shoes that fit perfectly. Gloria dressed slowly, marveling at how different she felt in clean clothes that actually belonged to her now. On the bedside table sat a tray with hot soup and fresh bread and fruit and a pot of tea. Gloria sat on the edge of the enormous bed and ate carefully, savoring every single bite. The soup was rich and warm and tasted like someone cared about the person eating it. Through the tall windows, she could see the city spreading out below. The same city she had navigated on foot for so many years now looked completely different from up here. A soft knock came at the door and Gloria called out for the person to come in. Catherine entered wearing casual clothes instead of her funeral dress. She carried a large photo album under her arm. Catherine asked if she could sit down and Gloria nodded, moving over to make room on the bed. Catherine explained that Richard kept journals throughout his life. He wrote about Gloria and about that night on the bridge many times over the years. He also documented all the work the Hayes Foundation did. Catherine thought Gloria should see the impact she had made, even though she never knew about it. She opened the album to the first page. The photographs showed homeless shelters being built with Richard standing at construction sites wearing a hard hat. There were pictures of job training centers opening their doors with ribbons being cut. Families stood in front of new apartment buildings holding keys and smiling. People in graduation caps celebrated completing programs that gave them new skills. Each page had notes written in Richard's handwriting explaining what the project was, and often including something Gloria had said that night that inspired it. Catherine pointed to one note and read it aloud. Gloria had told Richard that everyone deserves a second chance. That simple statement became the foundation of his entire hiring policy at Morrison Technologies. The company hired over 5,000 people with criminal records and homeless individuals, and people that other companies refused to consider. Catherine explained that these employees had the highest retention rate of any group in the entire company. They stayed loyal and worked hard because someone finally gave them an opportunity. Gloria turned pages with trembling fingers. Here was a photograph of a young woman holding a baby and standing in front of a new apartment building. The caption read that her name was Teresa Martinez, and she was formerly homeless but now worked as a housing coordinator for the Hayes Foundation. She helped 20 families every month find stable housing. Gloria whispered that she did not understand how this happened. She just talked to Richard that night. She just shared her own story of loss and survival. How did that turn into all these programs and all these people being helped? Sophie entered the room carrying her own cup of tea and sat in a chair near the bed. She told Gloria that their father used to say she showed him the difference between existing and living. Before meeting Gloria, he was chasing success to prove something to himself and to other people who doubted him. After that night on the bridge, he understood that real success meant lifting other people up and helping them find their own strength. Catherine turned to a section near the end of the album with pages that looked newer. She explained these were from the last year of Richard's life. He was diagnosed with his illness 14 months ago and knew his time was limited. That was when he updated his will to include all the provisions for Gloria. Catherine's voice got quiet when she shared what Richard told her. He said that he built an empire and made billions of dollars, but none of it would matter if Gloria was still sleeping on the streets. She gave him his life, and it was finally time he properly acknowledged that gift in a way she could not refuse. Gloria closed the album very gently, like it was something precious. She said that Richard gave her life back too. People thought being homeless meant giving up, but sometimes it was the opposite. Gloria chose the streets after her daughter Linda died in a car accident. She could not bear to live in the house they shared or walk the streets they walked together. The homeless community was honest and raw, with no pretensions or false comforts. But that night, with Richard helping him find his way back from the edge, reminded her why life still mattered. Even in pain and even in loss, there was still purpose in helping another human being. The room fell into a comfortable silence for several moments as the three women sat together, sharing an understanding that went beyond words. Brandon appeared in the doorway and said that Marcus was downstairs with some papers that needed attention, but only if Gloria felt ready to deal with them. Gloria took a deep breath and said she supposed she should start understanding what all of this actually meant. They went downstairs to Richard's study, which was a large room filled with bookshelves and leather furniture. Marcus had papers spread out on the desk in neat, organized stacks. He explained that the trust was straightforward in its structure. $100 million had been invested conservatively in various stocks and bonds. The investments currently generated approximately $4 million per year in interest alone. Gloria could access the principal amount or just take the interest or leave everything untouched. The choice was entirely hers to make. Gloria stared at the numbers on the papers, but they seemed more like abstract concepts than actual money that belonged to her. She asked Marcus about the house. Marcus smiled and pulled out his tablet computer to show her photographs. He explained the brownstone was located on Willow Street in Brooklyn Heights. The house had 4 stories with original details from the 1800s that Richard had carefully restored. There were 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms and a private garden in the back. The house even had a view of the Brooklyn Bridge where Gloria first met Richard. Marcus said Richard bought the property 12 years ago and spent 2 years renovating it to maintain its historical accuracy. A caretaker service had been maintaining it ever since, waiting for this exact day. The photos showed a beautiful home that was elegant but also warm and welcoming. Hardwood floors gleamed in the sunlight. High ceilings made the rooms feel spacious. Built-in bookshelves lined one wall. There was a fireplace with a carved wooden mantel. Gloria recognized this kind of house from her years walking through Brooklyn. She had passed brownstones like this 1,000 times, never imagining she would enter one, much less own it. Marcus cleared his throat and his expression became softer. He told Gloria there was one more thing Richard left for her. He had recorded a video message 6 months before he died. Richard wanted Gloria to see it whenever she felt ready. Gloria looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. Catherine said they had all watched it already. The message was for Gloria, but Richard knew his family would be present when she saw it. Marcus set up a laptop computer on the desk, and after a moment, Richard Morrison's face filled the screen. He looked older than Gloria remembered from the occasional news article she had seen over the years. His hair had turned silver and his face showed lines from age and illness, but his eyes still held the same intensity she recalled from that desperate young man on the bridge decades ago. Richard's recorded voice came through the speakers warm and clear. He greeted Gloria by name and said that if she was watching this, then his journey had ended and hers was beginning anew. He hoped she could forgive him for the deception of not giving her these gifts while he was alive. She would have refused them, and they both knew that was true. Gloria found herself smiling even as tears rolled down her cheeks. Richard continued speaking directly to her through the screen. He reminded her that she once told him the measure of a life was not in what people accumulated, but in the connections they made, and the kindness they showed to others. He said she was right about that, as she was right about so many things. Everything he built and every success he achieved could be traced back to that night when she showed compassion to a stranger, even though she herself had nothing to give but time and words. Richard paused in the video, seeming to gather his thoughts carefully. He explained that the money and the house were not payment for saving his life. Nobody could put a price on a life saved or wisdom shared freely. These things were simply tools. What Gloria chose to do with them was entirely her own decision. If she wanted to sell the house and give away all the money, that would be fine. If she wanted to return to the streets, that would be fine too. But Richard wanted her to know that she deserved comfort and security and peace. She had more than earned the right to those things. Richard's expression grew more serious on the screen. He told Gloria about the Hayes Foundation and how Catherine and the children would continue running it. But Richard had designated Gloria as a permanent board member if she chose to accept the position. Her voice and her perspective were desperately needed. The people making decisions about how to help homeless individuals should include someone who actually lived that experience and understood it from the inside. There was no pressure to accept, but the option would always remain open. Richard smiled again, and this time there was a hint of mischief in his eyes. He said he wanted to thank Gloria. Thank you for seeing him when he was invisible to himself. Thank you for staying when she could have simply walked away. Thank you for teaching him that wealth without humanity was just poverty and expensive clothes. Thank you for showing him that true richness came from how people treated those society had forgotten. Richard's voice grew thick with emotion. He said that Gloria Hayes saved his life, and he spent every single day since that night trying to honor that gift. The video ended, leaving silence in the study. Gloria sat completely still with tears streaming down her weathered face. After a long moment, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Gloria said she would accept the board position at the Hayes Foundation. She wanted the house too. As for the money, she needed time to think about how to use it wisely. She looked at Marcus and asked if some of the money could be used to expand the foundation's work to help more people. Marcus nodded and said absolutely any amount she wanted to designate could go to the foundation. Gloria thought quietly for a moment while everyone waited patiently. She announced that $50 million should go to the foundation immediately. The remaining $50 million she would take time to consider carefully. She wanted to start visiting the shelters and job training centers that Richard built. If she was going to serve on the board, she needed to understand what Richard created and how it actually worked. Catherine reached across and took Gloria's hand. She told Gloria that Richard would be incredibly proud of these decisions. Sophie asked what Gloria wanted to do first now that everything was decided. Gloria looked around at these people who had welcomed her into their family without hesitation. She looked at the documents that represented a life she never imagined possible. She looked through the window at the city spread out below. Her city seen now through completely different eyes. Gloria said slowly that she would like to see the house on Willow Street. After that, she wanted to go back to Mr. Patel's deli and order a sandwich. Not a day-old sandwich that he gave her out of charity. She wanted a fresh sandwich made just for her. And she wanted to pay for it herself with her own money. Brandon laughed, and the sound broke the serious tension that had filled the room. He said that sounded like an absolutely perfect plan. Marcus gathered up the papers and promised to have everything properly filed within a few days. He gave Gloria his business card and told her to call any time, day or night, if she had questions or needed anything at all. The family prepared to take Gloria to see her new home. Catherine suggested they stop and buy Gloria some additional clothes first, but Gloria shook her head. She said the clothes she was wearing were fine for now. She wanted to see the house exactly as she was in this moment, so she would always remember where she came from. The drive to Brooklyn Heights took 30 minutes through afternoon traffic. Gloria watched the neighborhoods change as they crossed the bridge. The same bridge where she met Richard all those years ago. She wondered what he would think seeing her now riding in his family's car going to claim the house he bought for her. The car pulled up in front of a beautiful brownstone with a black iron fence and window boxes that would hold flowers in the spring. The front door was painted deep blue. Stone steps led up from the sidewalk, worn smooth by more than a century of footsteps. Marcus was already waiting, having driven separately. He held the silver key that Richard left for Gloria. She took it and her hand shook as she climbed the steps. The key turned smoothly in the lock and the door swung open. Gloria stepped inside and gasped. Sunlight poured through tall windows. The floors were rich, dark wood polished to a shine. A staircase curved upward to the second floor. To the left was a living room with the fireplace she saw in the photos. To the right was a dining room with a table that could seat 8 people. Everything was furnished but not cluttered. The style was classic and timeless. Gloria walked through the rooms in a daze, touching furniture lightly, like she needed to confirm it was real. The kitchen had been updated with modern appliances but kept its vintage charm. There was a small office with a desk and more bookshelves. Upstairs, the bedrooms were spacious with high ceilings and large closets. The main bedroom had windows overlooking the garden. Gloria stood at those windows and looked down at the small private space filled with bare trees that would bloom green in a few months. Catherine came to stand beside her. She said the garden had a table and chairs for sitting outside when the weather was nice. There were raised beds for growing vegetables or flowers if Gloria wanted. The previous owner had kept bees, but the hives were gone now. Gloria turned to Catherine with tears in her eyes again. She asked why Richard did all this. Why go to such lengths for someone he met just once for a few hours so long ago? Catherine smiled gently. She explained that Richard never forgot a kindness and he never broke a promise. That night on the bridge, Gloria gave him a reason to live when he had given up hope. Everything he built after that night existed because she cared enough to stop and talk to a stranger in pain. This house and the money and the foundation were not payment. They were gratitude expressed in the only way Richard knew how. Sophie called from downstairs that she found something. They went down to find her in the office holding a framed photograph. It showed a much younger Richard standing on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise. He looked tired but peaceful. On the back, someone had written the date and a simple message. New beginning. Gloria realized this photo was taken the morning she walked Richard home from the bridge. He must have gone back later that day to capture the moment. Now it hung in the house he bought for her decades later. Brandon suggested they continue the tour. The basement had been converted into a comfortable recreation room with a television and soft couches. There was a small bathroom down here too. The whole house was perfect. Not too big or showy, but substantial and well-made. A real home. They ended the tour back in the kitchen. Marcus explained that the utilities were all set up and paid for a year in advance. The property taxes were handled through a trust. There was a cleaning service that came twice a month, but Gloria could cancel that if she preferred. The garden service would start again in spring unless she wanted to tend it herself. Everything was arranged so Gloria would have no immediate expenses to worry about. Gloria walked through each room one more time by herself while the Morrison family waited downstairs. She needed to feel the space alone to understand that it was truly hers. In the main bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the beautiful furniture and the clean walls and the windows that let in so much light. For years, she had slept in doorways and shelters and under bridges. Now she had 5 bedrooms to choose from. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe for a moment. Then she remembered Richard's face in the video, his words about her deserving comfort and peace. She took a deep breath and let herself believe it might be true. When Gloria came back downstairs, she told everyone she was ready to go get that sandwich now. They drove to Mr. Patel's Deli, which was a small shop squeezed between a laundromat and a phone repair store. The bell above the door chimed when they entered. Mr. Patel looked up from behind the counter and his eyes went wide when he recognized Gloria. He started to reach under the counter where he kept the day-old sandwiches he saved for her, but Gloria held up her hand. She told him she wanted to buy a fresh sandwich today. She wanted turkey and cheese with lettuce and tomato on whole wheat bread. Mr. Patel looked confused, glancing between Gloria in her clean new clothes and the well-dressed people with her. Gloria pulled out a $20 bill that Marcus had given her from the petty cash he kept for the estate. She laid it on the counter and said she was paying full price. Mr. Patel made the sandwich carefully, adding extra meat and cheese. He wrapped it in paper and put it in a bag with napkins and a pickle. When he rang it up, the total came to $8.50. He tried to give Gloria change, but she told him to keep it. She said he had been kind to her for years when he did not have to be. This was her way of saying thank you. Mr. Patel's eyes filled with tears and he pressed his hands together in a gesture of gratitude. He told Gloria he was happy to see her doing well. She deserved good things. Gloria introduced Catherine and Sophie and Brandon. She explained these were the family of a man she helped a long time ago. They were helping her now in return. Mr. Patel nodded, understanding the basic shape of the story, even if he did not know the details. He said that was how the world should work. People helping people. They sat at a small table near the window and Gloria unwrapped her sandwich. She took a bite and closed her eyes. It tasted like victory and new beginnings. Sophie asked Gloria what she planned to do next after she settled into the house. Gloria said she honestly did not know. She had spent so many years with her only concerns being food and shelter and safety. Now those things were guaranteed. She would need to find a new purpose. Catherine suggested that getting involved with the foundation would give Gloria plenty of purpose. There was so much work to do and so many people to help. Gloria nodded slowly. She liked that idea. She could use her experience to make sure the programs actually helped people, instead of just making rich donors feel good about themselves. Brandon mentioned that Morrison Technologies was always looking for consultants who could provide perspective on social programs. The company gave millions to charity every year. Having Gloria's input on which organizations deserved support would be valuable. Gloria smiled and said she would think about it. Right now, everything still felt overwhelming and unreal. She needed time to adjust to this strange new life. They finished eating and walked outside into the afternoon sun. The neighborhood was busy with people coming home from work and kids getting out of school. Gloria watched them all moving through their daily routines. She used to be invisible to people like this. Now she was one of them. A person with a home and money and options. The thought was terrifying and thrilling at the same time. Catherine offered to have someone help Gloria move her few possessions from the shelter to the brownstone, but Gloria said she did not have anything worth moving. Everything she owned she was wearing or carrying. She would need to buy clothes and toiletries and basic supplies. Sophie immediately volunteered to take Gloria shopping, but Gloria shook her head. She said she needed to do these things slowly at her own pace. If she tried to change everything at once, she would lose herself. Catherine understood. She wrote down her personal phone number and made Gloria promise to call if she needed anything at all. Day or night, it did not matter. Gloria was family now, and family took care of each other. Brandon gave Gloria his number too and said the same thing. Marcus had already provided his contact information. Sophie hugged Gloria tightly and whispered that she was so glad her father met Gloria all those years ago. Without her, they would not have had him. The family drove Gloria back to the brownstone and waited while she unlocked the door again. This time she walked in alone and closed the door behind her. Through the window, she watched them drive away. Then she turned and looked at her house. Her house. The word still felt strange. Gloria walked to the living room and sat on the couch. She sat there as the afternoon faded to evening and the room grew dark. She did not turn on lights. She just sat in the silence, feeling the solid floor beneath her feet and the roof over her head. Eventually, she got up and climbed the stairs to the main bedroom. She lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed. The bed was soft and the room smelled clean. Through the window, she could see stars appearing in the darkening sky. Gloria thought about Richard and about that night on the bridge. She thought about how one moment of compassion had rippled out across decades, touching thousands of lives. She wondered what would happen next. What ripples would she create with this second chance he gave her? 3 months passed and Gloria Hayes stood in front of the newest Hayes Foundation Center in the Bronx, holding a large pair of scissors. Catherine Morrison stood beside her along with Brandon and Sophie, and a crowd of reporters and community members. The building behind them had been an abandoned warehouse 6 months ago. Now it was a comprehensive resource center offering job training and housing assistance and mental health services and childcare all under one roof. Gloria had pushed hard for the childcare component during board meetings. She argued that single parents could not attend job training if they had nowhere safe to leave their kids. The other board members agreed immediately. Gloria cut the ribbon and cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions asking how it felt to go from homeless to running a billion-dollar foundation. Gloria smiled and said she was not running anything. She was just making sure the people running things remembered who they were supposed to be serving. She had moved into the brownstone, slowly filling it with things that made her feel comfortable. She bought books from secondhand stores and filled the built-in shelves. She adopted a cat from an animal shelter and named him Richard. She planted herb seeds in the garden beds even though it was winter, because she wanted something to look forward to in spring. The house never felt empty because Gloria made it a point to invite people over. She hosted dinners for other formerly homeless individuals who were getting back on their feet. She invited the staff from local shelters to come discuss what was working and what was not. Her living room became an informal meeting space where real conversations happened about how to help people in need. Gloria attended every single Hayes Foundation board meeting, and she never held back her opinions. When someone suggested cutting a program that helped people with addiction, she stood up and told her own story. Her daughter Linda had struggled with addiction before the car accident that killed her. Gloria explained that addiction was not a moral failing, but a disease that required treatment and compassion. The program stayed funded and actually got a budget increase. Brandon had been right about Morrison Technologies wanting her input. Gloria became a paid consultant reviewing the company's charitable giving and social programs. She was honest to the point of being blunt, sometimes telling executives that certain initiatives were just for show and did not actually help anyone. Some people did not like hearing criticism, but most respected her willingness to speak truth. The $50 million Gloria kept for herself got invested carefully with Marcus's guidance. She used the interest to fund small projects that the foundation could not support. She paid the rent for families about to be evicted. She bought winter coats and distributed them personally. She funded scholarships for kids from rough neighborhoods who wanted to go to college. Every Thursday, Gloria still went to Mr. Patel's deli. She bought a sandwich and then walked to nearby shelters distributing food and talking to people. She never forgot what it felt like to be invisible and ignored. She made a point of seeing people and learning their names and treating them with dignity. Some of them she was able to help with housing or jobs. Others preferred to stay on the streets, and Gloria respected that choice because she understood it. One Thursday afternoon, Gloria sat on a bench in a small park eating her sandwich when a young man sat down beside her. He looked defeated and hopeless. His clothes were dirty and his eyes were red from crying or lack of sleep or both. He did not say anything, just stared at the ground. Gloria asked him if he was hungry. He nodded. She gave him half her sandwich and they ate in silence for a while. Then the young man started talking. He said he lost his job and then his apartment. His girlfriend left him. His family did not want to hear from him. He had been thinking about ending it all because he could not see a way forward. Gloria listened. She had heard variations of this story many times. She shared a little bit of her own story about loss and survival. She told him about meeting someone on a bridge who was ready to give up, but chose to keep living instead. She explained that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stay alive when everything feels impossible. They talked for 2 hours. Gloria gave the young man the address of a shelter that had beds available. She gave him a number to call for job assistance. She gave him $20 for food. Most importantly, she gave him time and attention, and the message that his life had value. When he left, he walked with his shoulders a little straighter. Gloria did not know if she would ever see him again, or if he would follow through on getting help. But she had done what she could in that moment. The same thing someone did for Richard all those years ago. 6 months after the funeral, Gloria hosted a dinner at her brownstone for the Morrison family. She cooked the meal herself, which was something she enjoyed doing now that she had a proper kitchen. The menu was simple food that reminded her of better days before she lost Linda. Roasted chicken and mashed potatoes and green beans and apple pie for dessert. Catherine brought wine. Brandon brought flowers for the table. Sophie brought a framed photograph she found in Richard's old office. It showed him standing at a construction site for one of the first Hayes Foundation shelters. He was smiling genuinely, which Sophie said was rare in his work photos. Gloria put the picture on the mantel next to the photo from the bridge. During dinner, they talked about foundation business and company news, but mostly they talked about normal things. Movies they had seen and books they were reading and funny stories from their daily lives. Gloria told them about Richard the cat knocking over a plant. Sophie talked about her new boyfriend. Brandon complained about a difficult client. Catherine shared memories of her husband that made everyone laugh and cry. After dinner, they sat in the living room drinking coffee. Gloria looked around at these people who had become her family. She thought about how strange life was. How one moment of choosing kindness over indifference had changed everything for so many people. Catherine seemed to read her thoughts. She said that Richard always believed the most important moments in life were the ones where people chose to care instead of walking away. He built his entire philosophy around that idea. Gloria nodded and said she hoped she was honoring his memory properly. Sophie reached over and squeezed Gloria's hand. She said that Gloria honored Richard every single day by continuing the work he started, and by treating people with the same compassion she showed him. The evening ended with hugs and promises to get together again soon. After everyone left, Gloria cleaned up the dishes and put away the leftovers. She made tea and took it out to the back garden even though the evening was cool. The trees were starting to show small green buds. Spring was coming. Gloria sat at the garden table and looked up at the stars. She thought about Richard and Linda, and all the people she had known on the streets over the years. She thought about the young man in the park and wondered if he found help. She thought about all the lives touched by the foundation and the ripples that continued spreading outward. In the grand story of humanity, this was just one small chapter. One homeless woman and one suicidal young man meeting by chance on a bridge. But that chance meeting had saved thousands of lives and changed how a major corporation treated its workers and funded programs that would continue helping people long after everyone involved was gone. Gloria understood now what Richard meant about connections and kindness being the true measure of a life. Wealth and success and fame all faded eventually, but the impact of choosing compassion over indifference lasted forever, rippling out in ways that could never be fully measured or understood. She raised her cup of tea toward the stars in a silent toast, to Richard, who kept his promises, to Linda, who Gloria still missed every day, to all the invisible people society overlooked who possessed wisdom and strength beyond measure, to second chances and new beginnings, to the simple choice of staying when it would be easier to walk away, to humanity at its best,